smart tourist and intelligent behavior. An easy conjunction of two terms, smart and tourism, has penetrated the lexicon of those who write about tourists and technology. The adjective smart has been used to denote the use of various facets of contemporary technology, and the non-tourism services as the catch-all expression for the service meeting the needs of those traveling outside of their usual domestic circumstances. Arguably, this relatively new hybrid term and its derivative, smart tourists, avoid the opprobrium and pejorative labels used earlier to describe waves of outbound international visitors as ugly, offensive, and behaving in an unsustainable way. Nevertheless, as the advocates of discourse analysis are keen to point out, careful analysis of the language academic use to describe tourists should be undertaken, and the implicit meanings and subtle undertones of the smart tourist phraseology are ready for such appraisal. The present chapter examines the meaning of the term smart tourist by setting that expression within the rich tradition of satisfying tourists' needs. It is a widespread term of generic business and tourism management thinking that the needs of the customer must be met. A key measure in this process is that of ensuring tourists A key measure in this process is that of ensuring tourist satisfaction. Building on this view, tourism business sometimes deflect criticism of the sustainability of their operations with the assertion that they are simply satisfying the tourists' immutable and core needs in order to remain profitable. A broader and different views of tourism industry management may also be offered. A potentially more desirable, sustainable, and responsible tourism sector might exist if tourists were more intelligent, that is, smarter in the comprehensive sense of the term, and their motives and activity need to be more congruent with responsible behaviors. The perspective demands an understanding of the concept of intelligence, its evolution, and its contemporary conceptualization in the broad field of psychological science. It is the purpose of this conceptual analysis to review key implications from the substantial studies in human intelligence for tourist research. It is the first goal of this chapter to consider strategies to shape intelligent tourist desire. In this way, the concept of smart tourist will be linked to the forces shaping sustainable action and desirable tourism futures. Intelligence. Scholars have struggled with the task of defining intelligence. Two studies, which were conducted 60 years apart, the first in 1921 and the second in 1986, asked psychology and intelligence researchers of the day to write a paragraph defining intelligence. There were many variants of the 14 experts consulted in 1921. Some emphasized abstract thinking, and others the capacity to acquire capacity, and yet others placed an emphasis on the ability to adjust to the environment. The explanations and comments were equally varied in 1986, with the special perspective that most of the 24 commentators consulted had a preference for a descriptive metaphor to support their view. A general skill that can be owned, sets of abilities that fluctuate with settings, and an inherited way of dealing with the world. Used together, these expressions provide an effective overall definition of the core concerns of the research community who deal with intelligence. In the last 30 years, debates about the meaning of intelligence have been further stimulated by the emergence and the popularity of the concept of multiple intelligence, including emotional and to a lesser extent ecological intelligence. The new terms and their usefulness have been subject to close analysis, not all of it favorable. Definitions of terms have little meaning in social science analysis unless they lead to or are embedded in theories of the way a construct works. Further, the way to measure a construct which captures the breadth of meaning in a definition are also important markers of the utility of an approach, especially when seeking to understand aspects of social and tourist activity. These concerns are addressed in the next section by considering the trajectory of research on intelligence. Foundations approaches to intelligence. In the early years of the 20th century, minded educators and psychologists departed from merely discussing the abstract concept of intelligence and set about trying to measure human abilities and capacities. Leading figures in the ambitious task included the Englishman Francis Galton, the French educator Albert Binet, and Theodore Simon, and then the United States team working for the World War I effort under the leadership of Harvard professor Robert Yerkes. The tasks these researchers set themselves were to identify ways of describing the less able, those with defects and deficits in their way of responding to the world. The term IQ, intelligence quotient, became a core part of this delineation of abilities and was in effect a ratio of abilities in relation to chronological age. The less able individuals identified through these efforts were likely to need remedial education or be excluded from certain kinds of military action during war. Much of the work done so long ago, and despite its flaws, is still a part of popular culture and the social representation of intelligence. It is not uncommon to hear well-educated people still refer to IQ as an important component of viewing others. Elite societies such as Vanessa base their very membership on high levels of performance on traditional tests. A dark and not well-founded result of these early testing approaches was the formation of a view that specific racial groups, ethnic communities, and social classes were inferior and their profligate reproductive habits were reducing the overall intelligence of their country. It's easy to poke fun at the early items which were used to differentiate the able from the less competent. Such items now appear as a motley collection of value-laden questions which advantaged those with backgrounds resembling the testing authorities. The widespread application of the foundation approaches to intelligence in the form of testing instrument built on assessing fluid and crystallized intelligence in specific domains is a fundamental social contribution to society by psychological science. There all were recognized limitation of the procedures and experience testing personnel do consider the powerful influences of cultural variation. In response background knowledge, the issue of response styles, and familiarity with the testing procedures themselves. For the present, interest in the application of intelligence as a construct applicable to tourist behavior and experience. The wider interpretation of intelligence offered by Gardner, multiple intelligence, Goldman, emotional and ecological intelligence, and Sternberg, sexual intelligence, are interests when married with the twin concept of fluid and crystallized intelligence. The fundamental debate as to whether or not these abilities and areas of competence are really intelligence, or the confluence of social skills, is perhaps not as important as the recognition that there are sets of human abilities which matter beyond those easily tested in a computer-based or paper and pen format. The further application of and development of this interest in the applied intelligent social skills of tourists are considered by reviewing the initial forays into the field of intelligence in a tourism context. Intelligent tourists. The use of the term intelligent tourist is infrequent. Horn wrote an extant analysis of visiting culture sites using the book The Intelligent Tourist, and this single prominent instance of the use of the phrase offers a link to the psychology and educational research effort. Focusing on sightseeing as a major form of tourism, Horn's claims are developed as follows. Sightseeing can give new way of looking at people and things. It could be part of the search for building a general intellectual critique of existence. Tourists trading through fragments of old myths could realize they were close to the remains of supernatural beliefs, to past legitimizations of power, and to the legend and icons that give meaning to existence. Some could also recognize that they were trading through the lives myths of modern societies. A chance to get out among people different from us and places different from where we live, and not see them as the alien other but as an alternative. It is important to emphasize that being an intelligent tourist should not be seen as dull or without a sense of fun. Earlier in the same book, Horn suggests we can enjoy tourism all the more if we know how to encourage ourselves to do it critically, taking things as they come but also thinking about the intellectual shadows that surround them. Intelligent tourists can exorcise the spells cast around celebrated objects or activities and make their own transmutation. One hope for sightseeing and as an intelligent and useful pastime is that we become exorcists, and paradoxically, but this adds to tourism charms. An immediate charge against any emerging concept of fostering intelligent tourists and intelligent tourism is that it is elitist, a soap to the tradition of privileging what the novelist David Lodge has labeled well-furnished minds. Horn himself rejects this charge of elitism, noting that his interest is not in being positively elitist about what there is to be viewed and how to approach tourist experience, but rather his goal is to discourage tourists from merely doing tourism and tourist sites, that is, checking them off on a self-congratulatory checklist. Instead, he seeks to encourage all sightseers to view their journeys and contact for the meaning and reflection which they can generate. The approach offered by Horn of being an intelligent tourist is conceived as requiring some preparation, and the applicability of concepts developed in the previous discussion about intelligence is apparent. Both crystallized and fluid intelligence are needed to be an intelligent tourist. The former addresses the developing acquisition of knowledge about the historical and contemporary understanding of human history, the achievement of humanity, and the special character of places and environments. It is a daunting, lifelong personal capacity building task, but the argument is that by focusing on some background preparation for any anticipated tourist experience, then intelligent, well-prepared tourists will have an enriched journey, armed with their own understanding of the setting. The intelligent tourists can build their experience not just from what others tell them, but they can interrupt the incoming information with a wider personal view of the stories and setting at hand. Fluid intelligence is also important to the tourist experience. It is manifested in problem solving and successful adaptation to the cultures and setting in which tourists may be immersed. In particular, the expanded notion of intelligence offered by Goldman and perhaps best conceived as the range of desirable social skills underpinning successful complex interactions appeal as concepts germane to solving problems and limiting trouble during the tourist experience. For example, the intelligent tourist can both anticipate and extricate themselves from local scams by using their fluid intelligence, ability to reason and think logically about the difficult situation, potentially even using their social skill to disarm the tricks of the scammer. Learning and intelligent tourists. Evidence that tourists learn from their experience is not easy to collect. It is desirable to cross-reference data collection techniques and compare results conducted in different contexts to provide an integrated view. 3 empirical studies from different continents with diverse market segments offer some clear evidence. Lu examines the learning of outbound Chinese group tourists. The definition of Chinese outbound travel for this work was all mainland. Chinese tourists who traveled outside mainland China and that the work treated Hong Kong and Taiwan as outbound destination. The basic question driving the studies were: what factual information about the world do the Chinese outbound group tourists acquire and remember? What personal skills and values do they learn? What are their views, reflection of their own society? How might these learning outcomes be understood? The evidence from a sequence of studies involving assessing 100 blocks, conducting 200 interviews, and collecting 300 questionnaires was that the Chinese tourists identified a substantial list of facts, built a range of skills, and were promoted to reflect on their own society. Culture, general knowledge, natural environment, and food quality were reported as the 3 most common factual learning outcomes. The 3 most frequently reported personal skills and value-oriented learning outcomes were understanding another culture, adaptability in the new environment, and learning or using a foreign language. In addition, when the Chinese tourists reflected on their own society, they tended to think most about their living environment, social environment, and national quality. As the top 3 topics of particular interest to the discussion of intelligent tourists, the study by Lu reported that the most influential factor affecting the tourist learning was their self-initiated preparation for their travel. The understanding and information tourists brought to the situation in their preparation to travel were seen as having a greater influence on their knowledge acquisition than on-site information or material provided by others. The finding is aligned with the view that preparing for travel can be an intelligent tourist action with positive outcomes. to boost intelligent tourist behavior. There are 5 potential routes to encourage more intelligent tourist behavior. These pathways for promoting intelligent tourist behavior are derived from considering how fluid and crystallized intelligence can be built prior to, during, and after holidays experience. Additionally, in selecting these directions for action, the breadth of intelligence and skills captured in the review of the studies of intelligence served as strong guide to the direction chosen. The key opportunities are considered in turn. Legal and economic levers. Adaptability and a rational response to a new situation are a defining characteristic of fluid intelligence. The set of human and tourist-linked actions deemed permissible, law-abiding, and socially responsible that are implemented in any one community can determine tourist actions. The double meaning inherent in the remark that Singapore is a fine city exemplifies the setting out of rules and financial disincentive supported by effective public vigilance to shape intelligent tourist behavior. Intelligent decision by tourists which fit with their motive of exploring settings with fewer others can be manipulated by off-season discounts and shrewd marketing. Promoting smart use of space. A long-standing control mechanism for managing tourist behavior lies in the use of careful zoning of the use of space by authorities. One of the insights offered by taking up Horn's perspective on the intelligent tourist is to ask the question of oneself and others. Why are you here? This is not so much an existential challenge but a sharp reminder that sometimes tourists visit sites because they are famous for being famous. Having a sense of being in the wrong place and then complaining about the presence and behavior of others are simply dumb tourist behavior. Encouraging tourists, including those one who knows, to visualize what they will be doing and how they will feel in realistic scenarios at a tourist destination represent a pathway to better choices and the all-important principle of creating a functional fit between tourists, eudaimonic needs and site activities. As noted previously in the specific study of Juliet Balcony in Verona, Italy, revealed that tourists' ability to manipulate the meaning of the setting for their own purpose was central in building their subject realized good times. Being smart in this setting was all about an embodied subjective authenticity, the management of oneself in the setting rather than relying heavily on the provided information about the location. A better tourist image. The literature on humor and tourism flourishes in part because tourists are frequently depicted as participating in foolish behavior and making basic mistakes. The counterpoint to the foolish tourist is the resourceful one who contributes to the welfare of others, assists in the times of crisis, and blends fluidly into a role which people respect and value. Evidence for this social community and environmental contribution by tourists is publicized infrequently, and the benefits which their presence and action can generate for local communities underappreciated. As an example of tourists assisting in valuable ways, the role played by senior recreation vehicle tourism in Australia in major instance of flooding in Queensland. Australia has earned them an enduring welcome in many of the affected communities. The particular need here is a correction to the cliché about tourists. Instead of being lampooned for being out of place, they can be lauded for their initiative in seeking broader horizons. Many are likely to be better informed, have seen more of the variety of humanity and the world, and are able to comment with some authority on the international issues of our times. By examining the meaning of intelligence in a tourism context, key topics and strategies to shape intelligent tourist desire, which are potentially valuable for sustainability and with local needs, have been proposed. 5 such topics, which are broad ranging in their contextual import, were considered. Economic levers for intelligent action, building intelligence through extended destination contact prior to and post holidays, intelligent and usable technology filters for shaping on-site action, enhanced use of tourist zone designed to create intelligent specific use of space, and the reconstitution and representation of intelligent social position for the tourist role. Through the mechanism outlined and through the appreciation of the diverse skills and abilities which are highlighted by considering the forms of intelligence reviewed in the existing educational and psychological literature. The future may be able to see a new approach to studying and influencing tourist behavior. In particular, a serious opportunity exists to design effective short tests through imaginative scenarios which provide an indication of tourist fluid and crystallized intelligence for specific setting. Examining such test scenario could help assess tourists' ability to cope with troubling situation and build their experience in more thoughtful ways. It's a daunting and a complex task, but one worth taking up for senior research and higher level graduate students. While it is likely that ridicule about tourists and even tourist study will persist as a form of jealous researcher repartee, and a desirable outcome should be that in the future the term intelligent tourist, one synonym with smart tourist, is not a contradiction but an inevitable conjunction of terms. In short, a pleonasm, not an oxymoron.